Shai Gilgeous-Alexander never looked like he was trying to force his way into superstardom. That's part of why so many people missed it. The pace, the hesitation, the long strides, the calm. The way defenders kept thinking they had time right before he slipped past them anyway. That's why Shai's story hits now. Not because he came out of nowhere, because the signs were there for years. And a lot of people still didn't realize what they were watching until it was too obvious to deny. Shai Gilgeous-Alexander never felt loud. That's where his story starts. Not with hype, not with a giant media machine, not with people announcing him as the next face of the league before he had earned it. Shai's rise felt quieter than that. And that's exactly why so many people were late. Because from the beginning, his game didn't scream at you. It crept up on you. The long strides, the smooth handle, the stop-start rhythm. The way he could get into the paint without looking fast and still leave the defender behind. That was the trick of Shai. He didn't look rushed. He didn't look desperate. He didn't look like he was trying to win the possession with force. He looked like he was solving it. And that is a different kind of greatness. Because some stars announce themselves through violence. Shai announces himself through control. He gets to a spot, pauses, leans, slips past contact, and suddenly the defense is already behind. A soft finish, a pull-up from the elbow, a defender stuck on his hip. A whole possession ending exactly where he wanted it to. That's what made him so easy to underrate early. His game didn't feel loud enough for people who were looking for noise. But the evidence kept building anyway. He was the 11th pick in the 2018 draft. That matters too.
With the 11th pick in the 2018 NBA draft, the Charlotte Hornets select Shai Gilgeous-Alexander from Hamilton, Canada.
Because top 10 picks usually come in with bigger noises around them. Shai came in more quietly than that. He spent his rookie year with the Clippers. Then, in 2019, Oklahoma City got him in the Paul George trade.
And outstanding rookie point guard Shai Gilgeous-Alexander, Danilo Gallinari for Paul George.
That's where the real version of his story begins. Because at the time, a lot of people looked at that deal through the Paul George side of it. The blockbuster, the picks, the Clippers, Kawhi, the giant headline. Shai was in the deal, but he didn't feel like the center of the story. Not yet. That's the point. He kept living in the not yet part of the conversation while his game kept getting better. And that's what makes his rise so good. Because there wasn't one giant moment where the world suddenly decided to believe. It was more gradual than that. One season, the numbers climbed. Then the footwork looked sharper. Then the scoring got harder to ignore. Then the free throws kept piling up. Then defenses started loading up for him every night. Then Oklahoma City stopped feeling like a rebuilding team with a nice young guard and started feeling like a team being shaped by a real star. That is how Shai took over. Quietly at first, then all at once. And once he became a 30-point scorer, it was over. Now the conversation had to change. Now people had to admit this wasn't just a smooth young guard with good touch and nice feel. This was one of the most controlled and efficient scorers in basketball. And what makes Shai different is the way he does it. He doesn't overwhelm you with chaos. He wears you down with certainty. He gets to the paint. He lives at awkward angles. He makes defenders reach when they shouldn't. He keeps the game at his pace until everybody else starts reacting to him. That is star behavior. And when a player can do that while barely looking sped up, the whole thing starts feeling unfair in a different way. That's what happened in Oklahoma City. The Thunder had all this young talent, all these picks, all this future talk. But at some point, the future stopped being abstract. Because Shai became real enough to organize everything around. That's when the pressure changed too. Now he wasn't just a bright spot. Now he was the reason the rebuild could become something serious. And once that happened, the league had to start taking both him and Oklahoma City more seriously. Then came the part that made the whole story impossible to ignore. The awards, the winning, the full validation. This is where subtle turns into undeniable. Because once Shai started putting up MVP level numbers and leading Oklahoma City to the top, the conversation stopped being about potential. Now it was about arrival. And the proof was heavy. Big scoring nights, big efficiency, big regular season control. A team built around his calm. That matters. Because this wasn't just one player putting up empty numbers on a bad team. This was a superstar turning a young team into something real. And that's when the whole tone changed. Now this wasn't, maybe he's next. Now it was, you are looking at one of the best players in the world, and a lot of people took too long to say it. That's what makes the emotional angle so good. Shai wasn't hidden. He was just subtle. And subtle players get missed by people who only trust loud ones. But eventually, the proof got too heavy. The scoring title, the MVP, the playoff run, the championship. At some point, all the calm stops reading like softness and starts reading like what it really is. Control. And the best part of Shai's rise is that it still feels like his style stayed true the whole way. He didn't become somebody else to get here. He didn't need the game to get louder. He made the game slow down enough for people to finally see what he was doing. That's rare, because some stars take over by forcing you to look. Shai took over by becoming too effective to keep misunderstanding. That is a very different kind of power. And it's why his story works so well for Hardwood Untold. Because this isn't really a story about a player shocking the world. It's a story about a player the world kept seeing without fully recognizing. That's more interesting. Because once the rise is complete, people love to act like it was obvious all along. But with Shai, that's not really true. A lot of people were late. Late to how good he was, late to how hard he was to guard, late to how complete his game had become, late to how serious Oklahoma City became once he was clearly the center of it. That is the tension in his story. Not that he lacked proof, that the proof kept arriving before the respect did. And maybe that's why his rise feels so satisfying now. Because now the conversation has to catch up to the reality. This is not just a nice young star. Not just a smooth scorer. Not just a player with a beautiful game. This is a superstar. A player who took calm, controlled basketball and turned it into the center of a real contender. And what makes that so powerful is that his game still looks like itself. Still calm, still smooth, still under control. Still making defenders feel one move behind. That's legacy level stuff. Because every era has a few players who force the league to update the way it defines superstardom. Shai is one of those players. He proved that you don't have to be the loudest player in the room to take over the room. Sometimes you can do it with pace, with touch, with angles, with footwork, with control so complete it feels like everybody else is playing a different speed. That's what people were slow to see. And that's why his story lands now. Not because Shai Gilgeous-Alexander came out of nowhere, because the world kept staring right at him and still took too long to understand what it was looking at. If you want more basketball stories about stars the world noticed too late, subscribe to Hardwood Untold.